So, we are going to continue our how we had in the previous sort of lectures elaborated upon the understanding of time in that sense. Now, in this lecture, we are going to just delve deeply into the notions of time. These notions of time are very much they have a medieval strong theological or medieval underpinnings, which can be have you can border them or read them on or translate or transpose them with a nuanced understanding of how we can in the relativistic understandings of space and time. So what I'm going to do in this lecture is we are going to just read specific passages from this text and just maybe superimpose or them under a certain background. The background is a lineage of Muslim scholars or theologians or philosophers or exegetists, interpreters of Quran, who just try to interpret what is the fundamental notion of time, not only in relation to Quran, but from a background of this Aristotelian and Neo-Platonic traditions, as well as how fundamentally we can debate or inquire about whether the creation of world being eternal or it being created at some point in time. So in that these two questions, the creation, whether the world is eternal or it has been created, it's a debate going back from Plato and Aristotle. But the late 8th century, 9th century, 10th, 11th, 12th century, or a lot of Muslim theologians, or it was later continued also in 15th, 16th, 17th century from other theologians, from Ibn Sina to Farabi to Kindi, and then Imam Razi, and then taken by Mullah Sadra, Mir Bakir Damad. So these are all different personalities who are trying to engage with their understanding of time in a particular framework, or you can say framework is may not be better term. It is basically how they were trying to wrestle these ideas, Neoplatonic, Aristotelian ideas, the Quranic notions of God being Allah being supreme, and He is creator, and He is also creator of time. How they fundamentally try to make sense of things, and just trying to see not only philosophers, not only mystics, not only materialists, not only theologians or peripetics, Platonists. So, what was the synthesis or tapestry which was unique to each thinker and each philosopher in his own time? So, there are various terms, whether this notion of time, what we call time in Muslim theological discourse, time is not the time in that linear sense, time, or in the Mactaggarian sense, the A theory and B theory, that we have a seriality attached to it, or you don't have a seriality attached to it. So you have various terms which I'm going to elaborate upon. The terms are like Dahr, Zaman, and Sarmad. These are three broad classifications, and these three notions of time, if you can try to understand, they are in turn related to this question fundamentally, whether the universe was created at some point in time, or time as a property is eternal because universe itself is eternal, or God as a creator in his that thing, the universe and the creator are coexisting, and so is the time as a property. It's perpetually existing. So it has to be seen fundamentally against this notion that the Quranic notion that God created the universe, because that's the main thing that it somehow can be seen creating contradicting this Aristotelian notions that a universe it's infinite in that sense. So, or from that you can also say time as a property, so is coming eternally coming from infinite. So these terms like Qadeem, which I previously also said in the Ashrite thinking, in the Maturidi way of looking at things, the Qadeem, it has been somehow how Muslim theologians try to interpret this word Qadeem, or their more sophisticated variant of it, or another word called QIDAM, whether something is prior, eternally existing in that sense, or beginningless past, which you can say it that way. So God as a creator who has created the universe in that sense. So is time a fundamental property which was existing before the idea before and after will come becomes meaningless if we say the universe has been created in that sense, or there's, so the word huds, when you say huds means something is ex nihilo, ab initio, created from now. The Ashrite notions, which I tried to discuss in the previous thing, the Ashrite notions of time, where time as a property is a now. It's not an now which is having a continuity. It's a now in that sense. So every moment is being created. So if that every moment is being created, and that creation, that moment is being created by the divine will of Almighty, Hurzat and Sifat are not to be seen in terms of in an anthropomorphic way, or in terms of tajsim in that sense. So question is if so whether time as a property is a fundamental property, or time itself is something created. So the question is whether time is a vessel in which a universe can be just seen, or universe creates a property called time, and which is relative to it. And there can be various ways. So the question is whether time is a vessel which has been created, but it's a property, or there is something called when we say beginningless past in that sense. So if the universe got created, so what was before that? The question of before that, it's meaningless in that sense. So it is something called beginningless origin, which you can see as God, but it is not a passive creator. He gives property to universe and the properties of time. So here, which I'll discuss, something called meta-temporal origin of time. So we don't have a simple time. We can also talk of time, which cannot be understood in human perceptual terms. What was the time before the existence of the universe? The meta-temporality of the universe in that sense, when the universe was created in the scheme of Allah, or creator. So what we can say is that there are various interesting passages in this text, and Iqbal is trying to straddle among different thinkers, from Imam Razi to using words like Dahr and what I should say, Mullah Bakir Dama to Alexander, to some physicists like physics and physicists quoting things from and verses from Quran, and trying to make, and maybe some 20th century notions of relative notions of space and time, and trying to make sense of things within his own religious epistemology, where he tries to find the notion of time is not entirely fatalistic in that sense. So there's some agency or will which is given to man, and there is an open possibility of future, and time has to be seen not in some if it's to be seen in relation to God or Allah or creator, it's not a passive agency. It's how the appreciative self appreciates it and creates the possibilities for a future in the act, not as a fixed or order of events with a definite possibilities. Means even if God in his what I should say, in his scheme or in his think knows how things are going to unfold, but in the act of trying to appreciate his divine order, there are creative possibilities which can be associated, how we can appreciate the notion of time in that sense. So what I'm going to do first, so there are four thinkers which, or maybe I'll take these Aristotelian and Platonic notions of time, the Quranic notions of time, then the notions of time as appreciated by Imam Razi and Muslim Ibn Sina, Imam Razi, and theologians, Muslim theologians, and how people like Mullah Bakir Damad and Mullah Sadra, Mullah Sadra and maybe Mullah Mir Bakir Damad's this Yamani philosophy, his Yamani discourse, how it was his book Kasabat, the book of blazing brands, how he has tried to just contribute to this question of time or appreciation of time, or time as it is to be seen. So maybe, for example, Iqbal, for example, says it starts with the metaphor of stream implied in this description suggests serious objection on Newton's equally objective view of time. So even though Newton's time was later, time was an universal container which had the same universe has time. So and every point in space had the same time. So time universe was a clock. So that maybe this is my comment. Maybe after reading these discourses, I could see that the way Newton's first law, second law, first law particularly, that force has to be defined as something external. It's an external agency which changes a body from its state of rest or uniform motion. So it has to be basically read. This is not a statement in isolation. This has to be read in the way medieval discourses. God is a prime mover or prime agent. So if in the Aristotelian scheme, God is a prime mover, only started and let it things. So you have to see it how the notion of a creator, the notion of a theology. So how we can define things. So you can read these Newtonian notions of space and time or Newton's laws, and basically they are responding to these discourses which were set by these people in medieval times, and they are fundamentally being trying to modify, for example, Ibn Sina and Farabi and Al-Kindi somehow to different degrees tried to accommodate the Aristotelian notions of space and time, of a universe being eternal or God and universe being eternal. So, but somehow it conflicted the very notion of Quranic notion that universe has been created. So you can see their attempts trying to just somehow trying to find middle ground. So there are various variants. So for example, Al-Kindi says the universe, if we started, if we have seen, for example, if something comes to you, means so motion stops, something called harkat. If something stops at you, means it had if some moving body stops at this point, you see something stopping, so it had started somewhere. So if you reach at some point in time, means the time also has been started. So these two notions, so this means universe has been started. So time and universe was itself started in that sense. Or Imam Ghazali says, since everything has a cause, which we are seeing, so material things have cause. So universe itself cannot come without a cause, and that cause. So this means the universe had started at some point in time. So these thinkers try to wrestle with these notions, and maybe later the origin, the what I should say, the crystallization of these debates comes in the way Mir Mullah Damad, he formulated these notions in his book, and which was later Moderno Mullah Sadra also tried to see things, but he just disagreed with his teacher in some sense, but taking some aspects of things, his things. And maybe there is another person, Soharwardi, also, which Iqbal also has quoted some in the start. His illuministic school or Ishraqi philosophy. So there is this. Uniquely, the way I quoted previously the verses of Quran, so God is being the light of the universe. How these Ishraqi school, these Neoplatonic Aristotelian elements, and means God being the light of the universe, the Ashrite notions, how they all in the unique admixture somehow try to give an understanding of time. So time as a property fundamentally being created. So time is not at some point in time. So time is not created in time. Time created in time. So you cannot see time as a passage, but it's not that it's in the background on some passage which is called time, and that the universal property which is eternally existing. No. So time as such has been created, or it's not time. The universe can be seen as a vessel in the flow of time. So this is another way of interpreting things, but that it has been created at some point in time. And before that, what was there? So the Barzakhi world, so the world, so the existence of the universe. So God as a creator is existing in that super meta-temporal eternity, or QIDAM or Qadeem, or beginningless cause, existing before the existence of the time. And time and universe as a property got created at some point in time. So this is the thing. Against the background of this Aristotelian notion that God and the universe had co-terminity with the time. In that time is the property of universe which is eternal to the existence of God. God gives property to that thing. So this is the way we are trying to see. So what we are going to do is I'll discuss some of the maybe points of these thinkers against maybe some passages of 20th century physics, and how we can and trying to understand some ways in which we can see some notions of time, space, time, and maybe within the background of how we see time in through physics, through statements of some of the insightful passages of Iqbal, and through these thinkers in that sense. Because Iqbal has quoted these people. For example, he quotes, he says that Imam Fakhruddin Razi made some fundamental contributions among Muslim theologians like Fakhruddin Razi, who appears to have given his most serious attention to the problem of time in the Iqbal's estimation, or Mir Damad or Mullah Bakir. For example, he says, so if I'll quote him in that sense, so if I'll say, so he called, so if I'll start, so for a physical system is since between two different and immediately consecutive states, the world remains motionless, time is suspended, so that time itself is discontinuous. So there is an atom of time. So this is one important statement. This statement we'll see how we can read it later. So, for example, Mullah Jawaluddin Dawani says, for example, the appearance of events as moving procession and conceive this span to be a unity, then we cannot but describe it as an original state of divine unity, encompassing all succeeding states of that activity. But Mullah takes good care to add that a deeper insight into the nature of succession reveals its relativity. So this disappears in case of God, to whom all events are present in the single act of perception. The Sufi Iraqi has a similar way of looking at matter. He conceives of infinite variety of time related to varying grades of being intervening between materiality and spirituality. So the time of God's bodies which arise from the revolutions of heavens is divisible into past, present and future, and its nature is such that as long as one does not pass away, the succeeding day does not come. So rising higher and higher in the scale of immaterial beings who reach divine time, time which is absolutely free from the quality of presage and consequently does not admit of divisibility, sequence and change. So the priority of God is not due to priority of time. The other hand, the priority of time is due to God's priority. So you can see, so divine time is what Quran describes as mother of all books in this whole of history. So God as a creator in whose what I should take the divine wisdom, the existence of past, present and future doesn't exist as these sectional wholes which are seen as parts of human perception, whether linearly or retroductively in that sense. So before coming to that, so I'm going to read some of the passages first from physics, some recent developments in physics and logic of time, and some statements of philosophers and logicians who have contributed, and then we can discuss philosophers like Mir Damad, Imam Razi, Mullah Sadra, and particularly or Ibn Sina. So particularly Mir Damad, that because he has contributed this question in that sense fundamentally. So, for example, in physics and or philosophy or physics or philosophy, we normally have something called reversible processes and irreversible processes. Means normally, even in, for example, notions of time, with thermodynamics as a subject, we say the entropy of the universe is increasing. So we say that the direction in which entropy increases is the direction in which we can appreciate the notion of time. So fundamentally, anisotropy is so structure of time is not something which is apart from particular kind of processes obtained in the universe. Instead, nature of time is rooted in the very character of those processes. So if I quote one of the physicists, philosophers, or physicists, or relativists, Brigman, who takes an operational view of how we can give meaning to the natural concepts of time. So time must be used as a primitive concept which cannot be analyzed and which can only be accepted. I see no way of formatting, assuming us to understand the notion of earlier or later in time. So this means that our inquiry, so he says, so I see no way of formulating or assuming to understand notion of earlier or later. So this succession, this teleology is not. So how does he want to see it? So our inquiry being one of context of justification, not context of discovery. It's not that we are discovering time. So we are trying to justify our how can appreciate time in that sense. So the fundamental equations in physics, whether it's Maxwell's equations or quantum mechanical systems, we say they are time symmetric. But for example, when we talk of arrow of time, so it's not fundamental equations characterized most solutions. For example, Popper says refutes the claim that even so when we talk of non-statistical or classical processes, they are reversible. He doesn't refutes that every non-statistical or classical mechanics process is reversible. You have fundamental. So moreover, the properties of time other than entropy depend upon conditions and not on the laws alone. In that sense. So Reichenbach says of only the totality of all causes permits an inference concerning the future, but past is inferable from a partial effect alone. But one can infer total cause from a partial effect, but we can infer the total effect from partial cause. So we can infer total cause from a partial effect, but we can infer total effect from a partial cause. So he cites evolutionary theory with aim of showing that, so which I talked also in one of the previous lectures, that things can be in evolutionary theory. We normally go into the past in the retrospective sense, but we don't talk things in the prospective sense. So the aim of showing that satisfactory explanation of past is possible, even a prediction of future is impossible in that sense. So for Reichenbach, time flows from earlier to later event and is unidirectional. But for Eddington, probabilistic interpretation of causality. So in the maybe if you remember, I talked of Henry Bergson's notion of time, and maybe our notion of time, the measurement of time, the way he disagreed with maybe Einstein. So he, so maybe another proponent of whether, for example, Grunbaum critiquing time as appreciated by Bergson. Time which inspired Henry Bergson misconceived polemic against a mathematical treatment of motion, while he unfoundedly charged with having earnestly specialized time by description, which leaves out the flux of becoming, renders only the state relations of earlier and later. So you can see fundamentally how we can whether our appreciation of a passage or in that sense it's out there, or whether it's in our inner self, we just appreciate that passage in some succession, in the succession, in the sense of succession, the way Bergson constructed it. Maybe in this 20th century, one of the thinkers whose name is Ian Pryor, he has talked about these notion of time, whether the strict notion of past, present, and future, or whether our notion of determinism, which is as attached to it, we can say it that way, inevitability or teleology, which gives a certain direction of time, whether thermodynamics or otherwise, or whether it's reversible or irreversible in fundamental sense. So, if we talk of, for example, prayer, it says prayers past, present, and future represents a prayer struggle and with the problem of determinism, including his study of tension between doctrines of divine foreknowledge and human freedom. So if we have a branching of diagrams, the way we say past, present, and future as an open possibility, whichever way you can go, or the way we have in many world interpretation of quantum mechanics. So you can in the there is a potency for infinite possibilities for the future to be just realized, but in the act of observation, which universe you choose, it precludes other possibilities. But in principle, so we can say that notion of time, where future is an open possibility, can be taken, resurrected, or can be seen in this prayers, how he defined this tense logical structures, which I'll just talk in some passing reference in order to add to the flavor of the topic we are basically trying to say. And maybe there is a tense study of logic, tense logic to the time. So what we call past, what we call present, and what we call future. So it's deeply rooted in some linguistic notions of how we construct past these language, and the relation of language with logic, and how time comes into it in that sense. So the Russell's notion, Russell's atomicity, or the way analytical philosophy sees about time, maybe the way I previously talked of how Saul Kripke talked of modal logical systems. So these modal logical systems can also be appreciated in how we can appreciate the logic of time, the tense logic of time, and seeing future as an open possibility. So if I quote Saul Kripke, he says, for every future point in the system, there is a new subtree consisting of its own past and own future. So time flows on, but once things get into past, they solidify and cannot be altered. So prayer in 1916 point had decided to create the universe, and for that prayer, to that point of time, God was not active or creative. So we'll see whether we can appreciate what was the role of God. So if maybe Stephen Hawking in his famous book Brief History of Time says, quoting Augustine, what was God doing when the universe God created? He quotes Augustine that he was just creating hell for people who ask these questions. So question is more in the prayer sense. So God as an agency or creator. So if there is a super eternal or meta-temporality, which is associated with how the time as a property got created before the universe. So if that's taken to be into consideration, so how we can see? So how we can see these ideas? Maybe in that sense. So we'll see. So time flows on, but once things get into past, they solidify and cannot be altered. This is a prayer definition. So you can read it in the background of McTaggart's these A theories and B theories of time in that sense. But so it's easy to see how there arises illusion of time as river down the immense float. So this famous thing, why should this example? It's often quoted. A river is moving down the stream. So when it's moving down the stream, it gives us an impression that time is somewhat flowing in the forward direction. So whether this, what I should say, this mapping is what does this, whether this napkin is fallacious or not. So let it, so I'll stop at here. So this is some random some sketchy observations of the state of maybe how people, maybe even in physics, if I talk of, people talk of this problem of time, people talk time normally in operational terms, so we don't as such have an ontology of time. So modern theories of physics, where time is taken as a property. So in fundamental equations of physics, how time is seen in that sense. So so maybe so it will lead to another question, the physics and time, but or the character of time, is it seen constant when the equations of physics, how things evolve, or time is itself a parameter in that sense. So we'll see. So this is another discussion. We'll just suspend it, or we just postpone it some appropriate future if we can. So here now we are going to discuss some of the ideas of mere discourse of philosophical discourse of Mir Damad. Mir Bakir Damad. He has written this famous book, Kitab Kasbat. So I was trying to say how we can resuscitate. So this notion of time, whether time being eternal, time being created as a property, it's very deeply related with this question whether universe was created or universe existed, or for example, so from where it is related with these questions. So we can also relate them with the developments in 20th century physics, where there are theories of inflation, where physicists talk about pre-inflation, or so we can relate these ideas can be related there also. So, but it will be maybe another lecture. But here we are going to see it how these medieval theologians or late medieval theologians, how they try to appropriate or appreciate it in understanding how we can define time. So, from where did the universe originate? What do eternal and created mean, and how are they related? Is creation eternal with God, or is it temporal? Is time exclusive to the material world? In that sense. So the topics of creation, exnihilio, hudut or QIDAM, was very important in depending upon attributes of God in whom both sides are believed. So according to philosophical outlook, so in the medieval, so if you had philosophers, if you had theologians, if you have rationalists, if you have materialists or Dahriyas, if you have naturalists, so you can have, there are these whole school or range of thinkers, how they try to appreciate these questions in that. Or if you just fundamentally take to Quran in that sense, where God says the time as a created property of Allah or creator. So according to philosophical outlook, cosmos exists by necessity. According to religious perspective, the contingent world depends upon God's will to create it. So Mir Damad says God is above all those proposed aspects of time. That's because Quranic verses are the objective goal of the discussions. So whether it's Judeo-Christian traditions or Islamic traditions or Muslim traditions, so there are theists. So the problem of time in all these traditions, for example, so theists who believe that existence of divine supreme being, which is God, strong believe that God was involved in the creation of universe. Plato, even though Plato believed world was created and eternal, Aristotle said that he was universal, universe is eternal. So the Greek, Christian, Jewish, and Islamic scholars have argued about the same ancient themes through medieval up to present day. You can see how people have taken revised Kalam cosmological arguments. But the mainstream physicists may not have accommodated these, or large, I will not say mainstream, maybe large, these ideas are not taken, incorporated in the main body of a scholar then we described. So there can be sentences, passing sentences here and there in that sense. So the question is, so whether this notion of Genesis, whether it has to be taken literally or allegorically. So if you take literal, that God was created in the biblical sense 6,000 years, so it cannot be plausible to modern mind. But if you have interpretations like that, those long ion, there's a word, God created universe in stages or days. There's a word ion means long days, each day 50,000 years. So you can just this if you allegorically interpret things. So this notion of time can expand it, expands. So so if I just focus on Mir Damad's philosophy, try to understand meaning of time in relation to eternity and related questions of originated or eternal universe of world, or hudut or QIDAM. So Mir Damad presents a notion of perpetual creation or perpetual origination, or huduti dahri in that sense. In his book Book of Blazing Brands, or Kitab al-Kasbat, so there has been continuous and so he says that there have been continuous and widespread disagreements between the respected philosophers regarding creation, which is called in Islamic terms huds of the world. Huds is something things are created ex nihilo. It's not a temporality associated with things that they have been coming. In the God's divine scheme of things, things can get created at that point. And eternity, which is QIDAM. And Muslim these theologians, they have used, one is Qadeem, beginningless past, the other is QIDAM. So this is another word. And the first maker being the fascia sanai, and the whole system in its entirely its originator. So there is another thing called mubda, ibtida in Urdu. Mubda, it's the property of Allah in that sense. So again, the question again arises. So did God create the world from nothing or from pre-existing matter? So this is another question. So if the world should be eternal and a deity is recognized, then deity's relationship to the universe would likewise be eternal. You can see it in the Aristotelian scheme, or the way Ibn Sina tried to just some model or some modifications try to see it. So universe owes to God not simply its existence, but its existence after non-existence. So eternity could also be taken as atemporal. So Al-Kindi wrote about the createdness and eternity of the world. But it's not clear if he believed in the existential al-Dhati or temporal, Zamani creation and eternity. So this is what I am trying to say in that sense. So against this background, you can also see the school, the way Ibn Taymiyyah, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, which were theologically believing in the theologically traditionalistic structure, align more with the hudud, means creation, where creation did not exist. God brought into existence, and their views were also more appealing to the general masses, which dominated later the school of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal in that sense, that God created this fundamentally, the universe out of nothing in that sense. Or he has capacity to intervene in the universe at every now and then in that sense. So if I just say maybe this Nasiruddin Tusi, he has explained maybe these terms like hudut and QIDAM in numerous books. So, for example, Tusi concurs with what both philosophers and theologians agree on, namely that God necessarily exists. He is essentially necessary and is the cause and creator of contingent existence. Whoever believes in the eternity of world is without dispute a disbeliever. So you can say this process of takfir in that Muslim theological discourse. So this has been very sensitive in the history of things, that how because these debates can also be seen in the way we see transcendence and immanence, the way we see God's anthropomorphism, Zat and Sifat of Allah. It means if God is seeing, does he have eyes? If God is all powerful, does he have a body? If God is all knowledgeable, how does he know? Is he having mind? So the literal sense or the allegorical or metaphorical way of looking at things in that sense. So if God as a creator, his Zat and Sifat, so he's not in that Zati sense. You cannot appreciate. His Sifat cannot be seen that way, in that sense. So how do we see these? How can we see these questions? They have to be addressed in that sense. When you give universe is eternity, so you give some sifat to universe, which are basically sifat of Allah. Or when you give time as a property, you give some when you say time has been there, so you just give some properties of time which are the properties of Allah or creator. So this is the way we can see. So for Mir Damad, in that sense, he uses the word called, he proposes solution to the problem of creation by saying that his solution to the problem of incipience of cosmos by interordering a domain of perpetual or meta-temporal origination. So this is what I was saying, meta-temporal origination. So existence of time before the existence of the universe. So Mir Damad's solution to the problem of time, the conclusion is that the existence of the world in his views is preceded by actual non-existence at the level of perpetual duration, not preceded by estimated, flowing, and extended non-existence. At the level of time as the theological assent, nor preceded by a parallel cohabiting non-existence, which is the state of quiddity. Only some philosophers are related to have asserted. So creation al-hudus means existence is preceded by non-existence eternally. So in the meta-temporality, when the universe got created, so the origin before that it was created by some universe was preceded by existence. The existence of the universe was preceded by non-existence in that sense, and which was external to it. The question is now that non-existence, which is external to the existence of the universe. So how did maybe basically Mir Damad, maybe he somehow meshed the ideas of peripatetism, Aristotelian ideas, Platonism, Ishraqi philosophy, not Ishraqi, the elimination of Suharwardi, and maybe Shia Islamic doctrines. So he's what's normally called his Yamini philosophy or Yamini doctrine. So he used Dahr as a meta time, that's metaphysical dimension. So if you see actually there are three words, three notions of time which I talked previously also: Zaman, Dahr and Sarmad. Sarmad is something between two eternities. Means the properties of Allah being azal and abd in that sense. So that's the infinite whole one. The other is Dahr. Dahr is when you compare when you compare infinite with something which is changing. One pole is fixed and the other is changing. And Zaman is when you are seeing things, relative change between two things which are themselves changing. Both things are changing. So the way we appreciate time in these Mir Damad, the way Mullah Bakr Damad tries to say, or even Mullah Sadra tries to say, is in terms of Zaman. It's not the meta-temporality which is existing before the existence of the universe, or before the existence there was preceded by non-existence, and non-existence is creator in that sense. So you can say a temporal origination or hududi dahri, which harmonizes both eternity and creation. The Arabic term Qadeem belongs to previous time. So according to philosopher, hudud is acquisition of something after it had not existed in prior time. So this is in that sense. With this opposition being QIDAM. QIDAM remains in one state and does not change or cease to exist. One is Qadeem, the other is QIDAM. This is invocation. Qadeem is eternal, beginningless past. But QIDAM is remains in one state, does not change or cease to exist. Means the properties of Allah or creator who is existing from azal to abad or sarmadi thing. So it's that you can say it that thing. So the question is, one is known as eternal itself, it's known as bidatihi, and another is eternal through other, bigairi. Maybe a lot of still you can try to say Miyadama is trying to straddle these Aristotelian notions of whether time as a property can be seen in relation to the sifat of Allah in that sense. So that's why he's using words like eternal by itself, bidatihi, or eternal by another, bigairihi. So here maybe Mullah Sadra, one of the students of this Mir Damad, he somehow disagrees with, not disagrees, he has his own notions of time, where you can say there is something called principality of existence and quiddity of existence. One is known as mahiyah, means taking existence primal. The other is known as taking sifat, the mahiyah. The sifat are existing. You can say these are those sort of platonic forms which are eternally existing, mahiyah. But you can appreciate them as in the sifat of Allah Ta'ala. But when you are trying to see in terms of zat, which is the materiality of the universe, so sifat are the eternally existing, how we can appreciate Allah in that sense. But when the world, or they were existing in QIDAM, or they had a certain meta-temporality or sarmadi, the azli, but when the world got created in that sense, you can see it. So when the world got created, now the question is how the time as a property God created in that sense. So whether you give time as a vessel, from in which the universe is, you can see the measurements in the universe, or time exists in time. It's also a property which exists in time in that sense. So you can say there can be some couple of sense. So here maybe Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina, and Ibn Rushd by the critical premise that universe and time are finite in the direction of past and do have a beginning, and it differs from the view of Buddha-Kalim theologians by an equally important premise that the beginning of universe is not temporal. You can see. So you can say three divisions of created exist. Something preceded by temporal non-existent, something preceded by absolute non-existence, and something preceded by relative non-existence, which I'll see how we can say, how we can appreciate this something called temporal origination. So vessel of material is temporality, which we call Zaman. Vessel of meta-temporality, a vessel of material is meta-temporality, which is called Dahr, and vessel of necessary existence, which is called Sarmad. So vessel of Zaman is meta. So you can say these three. So whether it's Mashai school of Ibn Sina or Suravirdi's Ishraqi school. So what we are saying basically when you talk of meta-temporal origination. So a lot of people, if you say in the theological discourses, there are various logics. One is a dialectical logic. One is symbolic logic in 19th century. The other is Burhani arguments. So the arguments normally these used by these theologians were dialectical or jadali and not demonstrable. So you can say in that sense the relation of fixed to fixed is Sarmad, the relation of fixed to changeable is Dahr, the relation of changeable to changeable is Zaman, which I saw previously in that sense. So for Mullah Sadra, each specific existence is preceded by temporal non-existence that does not cease in the duration of pre-eternity. As the effect, the created universe cannot be disjoined from the completed cause, the eternal creator. It is connected to the eternal, not in time, but in meta-time, which is called Dahr. Both its prior non-existence and its creation are temporal. So Mir Damad believes in three vessels, Zaman, Dahr, and Sarmad, and Mullah Sadra believes in two vessels, Dahr and Sarmad. So what basically the thing is that in that sense you can say these appreciation of means how can you can see also it in the background of how maybe Newton formulated his inertia and first law and second law. Maybe we normally read in books. He just Newton's first law is basically trying to come from Aristotelian notions of prime mover. Means force is something which is responsible for change. And things are naturally moving or whatever that is. But here you can see these discourses, medieval discourses. Basically, you can see Newton's laws and how he formulated it. You can see in these those discourses whether the universe was created or whether the universe started at some point in time, and how we define as a time as a property, where it is hoods or not, or time as a property is eternally there, or whether a creator who creates existence from non-existence, he's an external agency beyond the laws of causation in that sense. So if you see Suharwardi, he says replaced earlier direct influences of Aristotelian rationalism and Platonic into Allah. He is the first, the light of lights, the wajib or pre-existence, absolute necessity, the principal cause upon which all the mumkin, all the possibilities of creation depend on their existence. Now, this was Mullah Sadra, this was Mullah Dahr Zaman. Now we are coming to theories of Imam Razi, because Iqbal has also just talked. Fakhruddin Razi, who appears to have given his most serious attention to the problem of time. So you can also say Imam Razi also trying to straddle. Maybe he was an Ashrite, but Ashrite with some moral, some reservations. He had his own point of views. So he famously tried to interpret the Quran. We have these verses. One is muhkamat and another is mutashahibat, perspicuous verses and ambiguous verses. So for him, these Razi's views on creation and its arguments for creation ex nihilo. So how to interpret those mushahibat? So he's that if Imam Razi says it may be illuminating in that sense. So whether world is eternal or temporal. So philosophers' thesis was world is co-eternal with God. But if you have Imam Ghazali from Tahafut, he says, in contrast, the theologians held that world is not co-eternal with God, but was created by him out of nothing. Means the argument is world was created from nothing. From Imam Ghazali is that if you have seen everything in the universe, whichever it has some cause. So universe itself cannot be without a cause. So it came out of it. So you can say, why did he create the world at this? So you can, that's the reason. So the universe began to exist. Everything which exists has some cause. So universe itself had a cause, and that cause is a creator in that sense. Now the question is whether that is created the time as a property in that sense. How do we see it in that sense? So here one interesting argument which I'll just talk of, how Imam Razi maybe disagreed with Ibn Sina. For example, for Ibn Sina, cause and effect are related to created, and it was eternally causally related to the creation. Means if cause and the way he tried to rehabilitate Aristotelian notions of the universe being eternal, with coterminous with the properties of Allah. He says that if cause and effect are, for example, are related, so it was creator was causally related to his creation in that sense. So from that he could just rehabilitate Aristotelian notion that universe is eternal. But Razi says, since we see accidents in the universe which prove cause and effect may not be simultaneously related. So since we see accidents, so that can be the way we have force, how we define force. So if we see accidents, so that can be we see the world which proves that cause and effect may not be simultaneously related, and from this we can infer that world itself is accident. So world itself is an accident, it's hadith, it has been created in that sense. Yes. So from this we can infer that world itself is accident. If the world were eternal, it would not need an agent for its existence, and this would impair oneness of creator. Movement cannot be conceived except in conjunction with time. So this is the thing. So in the Imam Razian classifications, for example, he seeks seekers. So the way we have philosophers, theologians, people who propound theological arguments, naturalists, the empiricists, the mystics. So how do you appreciate this thing? So basically, what I'm trying to say is that in this entire discourse, what I was trying to say is that the notions of Zat and Sifat of Allah, quiddity, the mahiyah part of it, How Zat and Sifat of Allah. So from that you can see, appreciate things. So time, if time as a property also has been created, so God is behind it. So God is, so Ashari position which has been given by Sheristani. He says God is knowing in virtue of knowledge, powerful in virtue of power, living in virtue of life, willing in virtue of will, speaking, hearing, seeing. These attributes are co-eternal with his essence. They are neither identified with him nor they are different from him. Philosophers claim he is the first principle, al-madbad al-awal, true cause, al-ilah, and these notions would necessitate positive relations between him and caused world. So one of the main obstacles to a comprehensive and far-reaching knowledge is the phenomenon of time, since time is not a hindrance to God's knowledge, and God is not subject to the limitations of space and time. So we are coming to, so we are going to now relate with Iqbal. So it follows that it is quite possible that any event, whether universal or particular, or whether a prior cause or posterior effect, is known by God or creator. So this is what I have tried to say. So even if there is a Quranic verse, kullu man alayhil fan wa yabqa zul jalal ikram. So you can say even everything in the universe, it will just perish. What will remain is zul jalal ikram. It's that the eternal, the quiddity, the mahiyah, the Allah sifat. So in whose the matter is not something which has the property of self-existing in itself, neither time as such. So in the entire sense, there are maybe two passages which I found maybe appreciative. For example, Iqbal says, the appreciative self lives in pure duration, that's change without succession. This life of self consists in its movement from appreciation to efficiency, from intuition to intellect, and atomic time is born out of this movement. So this is a sort of discovery for Iqbal. So how he appreciates these Ashrite notions of time, and whether the intuitive notions that something exists in our preconceived notions, and how intellect appreciates things in that sense. So here another sentence is very interesting what he says. By conceiving God's knowledge as a kind of reflecting mirror, we no doubt save his foreknowledge of future events. But it's obvious that we do so at the expense of his freedom. The future certainly pre-exists in the organic whole of God's creative life, but it pre-exists as an open possibility, not as fixed order of events with definite outlines. So you can see how we can appreciate God as a kind of reflective mirror. What you see outside the universe sees you accordingly in that sense. But it's the sort of divine will which has some freedom to it in that sense. So one maybe there's another sentence where I think Iqbal has tried to say something very interesting. So thus inspired by best traditional Muslim tends to turn the Ashrite scheme of atomism into spiritual pluralism, the details of which have to be worked out by future theologians of Islam. So this may be his way of looking at how he appreciates Ashrite way of looking at things. So on the whole, whatever I have said today, these 2, 3, 4, 5 pages can be read within the background discourse, how people appreciated the notion of time. So previously I said that the previous lectures, whether time as a property is objective or it's subjective. So you can also see those debates here also, whether time is fundamental or space is fundamental, or whether even if time is fundamental as compared to space, then time itself is not fundamental as a property, as a vessel. It's also a created property. So in the divine scheme of things, Allah is more. He is to be appreciated. His zat and sifat, his quiddity, his mahiyah has to be appreciated. And you can also see something called meta-temporality in that sense. And also his whether God in his divine foreknowledge appreciates not only past, present, and future in his in one whole. This distinction doesn't hold for him in that sense. So maybe I have tried in today's lecture, tried to just communicate the notions of time vis-a-vis these medieval notions of time, and some maybe bit of maybe interjection with some elements of physics and logic of time. Maybe it may need some other lecture, but try to just connect things in this way. Hope you might appreciate today's lecture. Thanks for listening.